My name is Linda, and I am 70 years old. You know, people always told me that once you get to my age, life becomes predictable, almost like a well-worn path you can walk with your eyes closed. And for many years, I believed that. I thought surprises belonged to the younger folks, to the years of raising children, chasing careers, moving houses, and falling in love. By the time you reach retirement, people assume all that's left are routines. Your pills in the morning, your cup of tea in the afternoon, and maybe a phone call with family once in a while. But one rainy Tuesday reminded me that even when you're past 70, life can still knock on your door, literally. That day started out quietly, the kind of quiet that feels comfortable, but if I'm honest, can also feel heavy sometimes. The rain outside wasn't pouring. It was that soft drizzle that patters against the window like it's trying to whisper something. I'd just finished folding a basket of laundry in my little living room. My back ached a little. I've had that pain for years, the kind you don't bother complaining about anymore because everyone your age has it. The radio was tuned to a classical station, though sometimes I switch it to the oldies. There are days when I want to hear the same songs my husband and I used to dance to in the kitchen. The Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, a little Elvis when we were feeling playful. The smell of cinnamon tea filled the air. That's been my favorite ever since the doctor told me to cut back on coffee. He said my blood pressure didn't appreciate the caffeine anymore. I laughed when he told me that, but he was right. These days, I've learned to find small comfort in a teapot instead of a coffee pot. It was, by all measures, a perfectly ordinary day, the kind of day I thought I wanted, slow, safe, familiar. And then came the knock. At first, I thought it might be a package, maybe something one of my daughters had mailed. Sometimes they send me photos of the grandkids or little care packages with lotions or books they think I'll enjoy. But the knock came again, firmer, not the casual thud of a delivery. It was polite, but it carried expectation. When I opened the door, just a crack, I saw him. A man in his 30s, rain dripping down his jacket, a clipboard in hand, and a utility vest that made him look like he belonged. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his voice respectful but a little nervous. "I'm checking meters for the city. Would you mind if I stepped in to inspect yours?" For a second, I hesitated. In today's world, you can't always trust a stranger at the door. But there was something in the way he shifted on his feet, trying not to look me directly in the eye, that felt almost harmless. And maybe it was the rain dripping off his shoulders that softened me. Against my better judgment, I found myself saying, "Of course. Just wipe your feet." As he disappeared down the basement steps, I busied myself in the kitchen. I set the kettle on and tightened my robe around me, the damp air, sneaking in through the open door, still clinging to the house. I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. A 70-year-old woman looked back at me, lined face, silver streaks in my hair, eyes carrying both stories and silences. And I realized something in that moment. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had an unplanned, face-to-face conversation with someone in my own home. These days, so much of life happens through screens. My daughters call when they can, but it's not the same as sitting across from someone, sharing the same air, the same cup of tea. Loneliness has a way of humming in the background, so constant that after a while you almost stop noticing it, like the hum of the refrigerator. When he came back upstairs 20 minutes later, he gave me a small smile. "Everything looks fine," he said. "You've got one of the older models, but it's holding up." I couldn't help but laugh. "Just like me then," I said. He chuckled softly, but then paused, almost shy. would it be all right if I sat for a bit, just until the rain lets up? I don't know what made me say yes. Maybe it was the empty house, maybe it was that familiar sound of rain, or maybe it was the ache I'd been carrying quietly for years, the ache of missing simple companionship. I poured 2 cups of cinnamon tea and carried them into the living room. We sat across from each other, 2 strangers separated by decades, and yet it didn't feel uncomfortable. At first, I expected polite small talk, the kind that runs out after 5 minutes. But he surprised me. He glanced at the mantel and asked about the photographs, the black and white wedding photo of me and my late husband, smiling like the whole world was ahead of us, the snapshots of my children as they grew up, Halloween costumes, graduations, a photo of me holding my first grandchild in the hospital, even the faded postcards I still keep propped up, ones my husband sent when he traveled for work in the 70s. As I explained each picture, memories I hadn't spoken out loud in years rushed back. I found myself telling him about our first house, about the neighbors who used to bring over apple pies in the fall, about the way the neighborhood used to be filled with kids playing until the streetlights came on. Now most of those families are gone. Some moved, some passed away. The street is quieter now, filled with young families I don't know well. He listened, really listened. His eyes didn't wander. His attention never felt forced. And then he shared his own story. He told me about studying to become a paramedic, working meter-checking jobs to pay for school. He talked about his grandmother, the woman who raised him after his parents split. She had passed away last year, and I could hear the ache in his voice when he spoke of her. We sat there for nearly an hour, words weaving between us as if the rain outside carried them back and forth, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a warmth in the chest, a reminder that I was still here, still worth listening to, still part of the world. As the rain finally softened, he stood up, setting the empty teacup on the table with care, as if he didn't want to disturb the comfort we had built in that short time. "You've got a beautiful home," he said, glancing once more at the photos on the mantel. Then, almost as if the words slipped out without planning, he added, "You're very easy to talk to." I felt a strange flutter in my chest. Not the kind of feeling you get from romance. This was something different, something deeper. It was the comfort of being seen. I walked him to the door, half joking, half hoping, when I said, "You're welcome here anytime." He smiled, gave me a respectful nod, and said, "Take care of yourself, Linda." And then he was gone. For a moment, I just stood there with my hands still on the doorknob. The silence of the house rushed back in, but it felt different. Not quite as hollow as before. Almost peaceful, like the rain had left behind a kind of freshness inside the walls. That evening, I lit a small fire in the fireplace. I hadn't done that in months. It always felt like too much effort when it was just me. But something about the day gave me the spark to do it, filled with memories, daily notes, grocery lists, and even little drawings my children had made when they were small. For years, it had sat untouched on a shelf. With the fire crackling, I began to write again. I wrote about the rain, the knock at the door, the unexpected warmth of a conversation. I wrote about how it felt to be seen not as a widow, not as someone's mom or someone's grandma, but simply as a woman with stories to tell and room left to grow. The pen moved slowly at first, but then words poured out. Memories of old traditions like the Sunday morning pancakes my husband used to make, or the way the kids would race through piles of autumn leaves until their cheeks turned red from the cold. Writing pulled those memories back like a thread, weaving through fabric, stitching together pieces of a life that felt scattered. The next day, I opened the closet where I keep an old cedar chest. Inside were stacks of photo albums and boxes of letters. Some were birthday cards from decades ago, written in my husband's bold handwriting. Others were postcards from friends who had long since drifted away. I even found the first Valentine's card my husband ever gave me. Faded, the ink almost disappearing, but his words still clear enough to make me smile through tears. I spent hours flipping through those albums, running my fingers across the glossy pages. There was my son at his high school graduation, my daughter holding her first baby, the trip we took to the Grand Canyon back in the 80s. And there were silly ones too. Me with a ridiculous perm, my husband grilling hamburgers in the backyard wearing socks with sandals. As I sat with those memories, I realized how much of my life had been about taking care of others, making sure they had what they needed, making sure the house was clean, the meals cooked, the holidays special. And though I wouldn't trade any of it, somewhere along the way, I had stopped making space for myself. The young man's visit reminded me that it isn't too late to open that door again, to conversation, to laughter, to possibility. In the days that followed, I found myself looking out the window a little more often, wondering if he'd pass by again. He never did. Maybe he was just passing through the neighborhood that day. Maybe his route changed, or maybe simply life moved him elsewhere. But surprisingly, it didn't leave me sad. Instead, it left me lighter. Because that rainy Tuesday had done something no medicine, no routine, no television show had been able to do in years. It woke me up. It reminded me that I'm not finished yet. I started changing small things. I began walking a little further down the street in the mornings, nodding to neighbors I used to pass by without speaking. I dusted off my old record player and played albums I hadn't listened to in decades. Frank Sinatra, Carole King, the Eagles. Music that carried me right back to warm kitchens, road trips, and late-night dancing in the living room. I even wrote letters again. Real letters. I mailed one to each of my grandchildren, telling them a story from my childhood and slipping in a pressed flower from my garden. And you know what? They wrote back. Their handwriting is clumsy, their words short, but the letters are taped to my fridge like treasures. And sometimes, when the house is quiet and the rain taps gently on the windows, I still make 2 cups of tea. One for me and one for whoever might knock. Because I have learned something in these later years. Life doesn't stop surprising you. It just gets easier to miss the moments if you don't open the door. That Tuesday will stay with me, not because of who came, but because of what it reminded me, that there's still time for connection, still room for stories, and still a place in this world for me, even at 70. And if another knock ever comes, I'll be ready.